Going to do something a little different, not just like a personal reading. I want to give this in context first, and then a little bit of a reflection. The book of Job is broken up into about 4 parts. Your introduction. The introduction of the book of Job has this kind of, well, first you're introduced to the man, said to be a good and righteous person. Imagine that. Imagine the most famous book in world history, and you're a character in it, and its author in third-person omniscient form says, you're a good person. Wouldn't that be nice? He's got land, he's got children, he's got a wife. Life is great. And then we're also treated to a scene in heaven where God and Satan, or the devil, are having this little wager. And God says, hey, look at Job. Good guy. He praises me. And the devil says, you know, if you took away all of those nice things, he'd curse you. And God goes, we'll see. And that's what happens. Just the worst of the worst happens to Job. Tragedy strikes. I mean, his farmland is gone. His cattle all die. His children suffer a calamitous event, and they are all killed. And then in the end, he's covered in boils, sores, and sickness. And his wife says to him, curse God and die. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. This is the introduction to the book of Job. And what follows, that's like the first chapter and a half. The next 37 chapters of the book of Job are these ruminations, these conversations. Different friends of Job come to his house and say, look, you had to do something to deserve this. Bad things don't just happen to good people. That's one friend. Another friend who said, it's probably your ancestors. You're inheriting a curse from long ago. Another friend is like, the fact that you're so proudful about how good a person you are, that's the reason you're cursed. Friends like these, am I right? Job doesn't curse God in any of it. In fact, the phrase, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, that comes from somebody who has lost everything but his life and his wife. And then we are treated to God's response. After the 4th friend shows up, God finally shows up and speaks to Job. And that's going to be part of the reading. What I will say after this, after the events of Job, of God speaking to Job, there's this like tail end of the book. It's about 7 verses. If you're into superhero movies, at the end of superhero movies, there's a post-credit scene. It very much feels like that. And God gave Job a whole bunch of new kids and a whole lot of farmland, and he got all of his crops back, just to make everybody feel better. So that's the whole book of Job. That's in a nutshell. But I wanted the reading today is God's response. And that'll be kind of this point I'll reflect on a little bit. The reading is from Job, the 38th chapter. Then God answered Job out of a whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel with words without knowledge? Gird yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you understand. Who determined the measurements of the world? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line, the horizon upon it, on where its base is sunk? Who laid the world's cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and by all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made the clouds the garment of the earth, and thick darkness its swaddling band, prescribed bounds for it, set bars and doors, and thus far you shall come and no further, and here shall proud waves stop. Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Have you caused the dawn to start and stop? Have you entered into the spring of the sea, or have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. Where is the way of the dwelling of light? And where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the paths to its home? Surely you know, for you were born then, and number of your days is just so great. Have you entered into the storehouse of snow? Or have you seen where I keep all the hail, which I have reserved for times of trouble and days of battle? Does rain have a father? Or who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did ice come from? The waters became hard like stone, and the deep is frozen. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that a flood of water may cover you? Can you hunt the prey for the lion? Who provides for the raven its prey when the young ones cry to the Lord? That's the first chapter of God's response. He goes on for another chapter. Where is it? Here we go, right where I started. As you can tell from the beginning, God starts really big, and I'll lead with the last bit of God's poem. Is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars and spreads its wings towards the south? Is it your command that the eagle mounts up and makes a nest? From there it spies its prey, its eyes see its prey from far away. Its young eat and are satisfied. And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with God? Then Job answered the Lord, what shall I answer? I lay my hands on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. There's another poem. I know that you can do all things. This is Job speaking to God. And to that purpose of yours cannot be thwarted. Who is this who hides counsel with knowledge? I uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I do not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you and declare yourself. I had heard you by the hearing of your ear, but now I see you, and therefore I despise. I repent in dust and ashes. Again, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I do that as a kind of projected, it feels like it goes on forever, because it does. It's meant to be expansive and then super small when you really analyze the poetry. The book of Job finds itself in a particular camp, a genre of literature. See, some of our Christian brothers and sisters read the Bible as a constitution, as a legal document written by one author that goes on for several hundred pages. This is an inaccurate way to read the Bible. A better understanding for how to read the Bible is as a library. When you go into a library, there are different types of books. You don't read them all the same. And the book of Job is found in wisdom literature. Now, there's a little bit of discussion over which books exactly contain wisdom literature, but the three that are of best account are Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. The book of Proverbs, that's like the Twitter account of the Old Testament. It's great for that. It has good bumper stickers, right? Because it speaks about these like kind of broad truths that are generally true, right? A hardworking person will be rewarded. A lazy person will not. Most of the time, that's true. You know, children are the delight of a faithful parent. Yeah, broadly speaking, very true. We're on board, Proverbs. It is better to live outside on the roof than inside of the house with a contentious partner. Happy Valentine's Day. Generally true. Not one of the times to look over. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, I joke Proverbs because very quickly you read some of these Proverbs, you're like, yeah. The righteous will, a righteous king, is the delight of their people. Yeah. The Lord raises up those who are on right paths. Yeah. Proverbs is good for the colloquial wisdom, the wisdom that you want the world to really run by. But what about the exceptions? That's where we get Job. That's where we get Ecclesiastes. And I would argue that's where we get Lamentations and the Psalms, which are more hymns, but let's not split hairs. Because Job, the meat of Job, the large portion of Job is a discussion. Why do bad things happen to good people? That's the thesis. That's the whole theme of the book. Why do bad things happen to good people? If you are a righteous person, you are trying your best to get everything right, and stuff can still take away everything you want, everything you've worked for. All it takes is the wind to blow wrong, or some cosmic entity to take a wager on you. But that's what it feels like. At least that has a little bit of meaning. When our newspapers and our cell phones are filled with stories of people who didn't have it coming and still got it, who seem to have gotten my share of bad endings. I have frequently said, people ask me, how you doing? Most people will ask you, how you doing? One of my favorite responses, better than I deserve. Because my life right now, pretty sweet. And I don't know what I did to deserve it. So I'm doing better than I deserve. Especially when I see how much so many few folks do. How hard so many folks have it. God's response to Job is an unsatisfying one for most. I've known this for years, but I still like it. It reminds me of trying to eat one potato chip. You eat one and you're like, come on, there's got to be a little bit more there. Have you ever tried that? Impossible. God's response to Job in no uncertain terms, your understanding of God, you're never going to get there. I understand that you're frustrated. I mean, I'm personifying God. Depending on how you read God's voice, this is one of those like acting lessons. It's just a script. So does God come across as condescending? That's kind of the voice I was giving. It was like, who are you to question me? I have heard this read with, when Josiah, my middle, came up to me, Dad, what's taxes? I'm like, you're 7. Well, ask me later. Would you like some candy? And then give me one. That's taxes. No. That's Dad's tax. No, God's response to Job is you'll never get it. I've said to many folks, if you are a two-dimensional figure, a cartoon, you only understand 2 directions, up, down, left, and right on a piece of paper. You are on one plane of existence. You don't understand 3 dimensions, right? God's beyond the number of dimensions we exist in. But we still have a life. I still have people I love. How do you make sense of that? Well, our Jewish brothers and sisters have the rest of the Old Testament, what they call the Hebrew Bible, or what it's actually called. For Christians, for those of us gathered here today, our wisdom literature is usually couched in parables. These are the teachings of Jesus, who uses metaphor to try to bring out your imagination. Somebody came to Jesus asking, with nothing but worry and concern, what smart Alex like me call existential crisis. Jesus said, consider the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap. God provides. Consider the lilies of the field. Well, how do I do that, Jesus? That's like one step better. Well, for Ash Wednesday, this couches one of the realities, the 2 realities as a response that Jesus offers. If Jesus' death, which is what this kicks off, this whole service kicks off, is this march towards Calvary, it is a reminder that you and I are going to die. One day our heart stops beating, the energy in our brains, the neurosynapses will stop firing, and our body will cease to work. And that's a reality that comes to all of us eventually, somehow, some way, and we all have our own ways of dealing with it. Ash Wednesday is meant to put it in our face as a reminder. And I've had so many, I've preached a few Ash Wednesdays where that's the whole story. Because we're entering Lent. But that's not the whole of Jesus' wisdom. The wisdom of the Jesus tradition is if you embrace your death, you embrace the fact you've picked up your cross, you know that in any moment you might meet your Maker. You do so with a confidence of resurrection. And so this Ash Wednesday, I'm going back to something that I was taught to try and impress upon us, the balance. That we don't end with Job 38. The goal is Mark 16, is the last chapter, with resurrection. Rabbis used to teach, you'd have 2 slips of paper in your hand. You'd have one in one hand, one in the other, you put them in your pockets. On one slip of paper is the same liturgy you have heard at countless Ash Wednesday services. One slip of paper, it says, remember that you are dust. To dust you will return. And that's one pocket. And on the other, the universe was made for me. Have you ever sat and looked at a sunset and went, am I the only person who gets to see this? Have you held a baby in your hands and had them grip your finger? Have you ever been present for a moment that seemed so holy that God felt like just reached out and grabbed you? Yeah, that moment was just for you. So the rabbis used to say, where are you? Which slip of paper do you need? When you come down tonight for your ashes, I'm going to say both. Because I don't know what you need this night. Do you need to be reminded? Are you so full, so on top of the moon that you just need a reminder that to appreciate the now, to be reminded that you are dust? Or has the news, your work, family pressures ground you into dust, and you need to be reminded that God makes beautiful things out of dust? Amen.